Dear learners, welcome back to WSE History Uncovered, where learning English is not just about words or grammar, but about exploring the real human stories behind the events that shaped our world. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing alone in the shadow of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The air is still, the desert silent, except for the wind carrying thousands of years of history across the sand. You reach out and touch the cold stone, carved by hands that lived before Christ, before Rome, before the printing press or the internet. And somehow, you feel connected to something bigger than yourself. Something timeless. Now shift your mind to the quiet halls of Kyoto's ancient temples, where wooden beams soaked with incense have stood through typhoons, wars, and centuries of change. Or to the Maori carvings of New Zealand, each one telling a story of ancestry, land, and spiritual connection, passed down not by books, but by living memory. What ties these places together? They are not just old. They are not just beautiful. They are cultural heritage, the living memory of who we are, who we were, and who we might become. But here's a mystery. Why have some pieces of cultural heritage lasted thousands of years, while others vanished overnight? Why do we preserve temples but forget songs, protect ruins but neglect traditions? And when we say something is heritage, what are we really protecting? The stones? The symbols? Or the soul of a people? This story isn't about one country or one era. It's about the world. From Asia to the Americas, from the sands of Africa to the forests of Europe, we've inherited wonders. Some carved in stone. Some whispered in stories. Some nearly lost forever. Today, we'll journey through some of the most extraordinary cultural treasures humanity has created and ask the questions that still haunt us. What do we owe to the past? And what does the past still ask of us? If you'd like to support this journey, you can click the thanks button or tap join to explore 3 levels of exclusive member perks. Every bit of support helps us keep creating meaningful content for you and helps us protect this kind of learning for others around the world. Let's begin this exploration together. Not just with our eyes open, but with our hearts ready to feel the deep weight, beauty, and fragility of cultural heritage. Because some stories, once lost, never come back. But in one forgotten corner of the world, a question would ignite a search for truth, and shake everything we thought we knew about what it means to preserve a legacy. What makes something worth preserving? Is it age? Beauty? National pride? Or something deeper? Something harder to measure? Consider this: around the world, people have built, sung, carved, and dreamed for millennia. But only a fraction of those creations survive today. And even fewer are celebrated as heritage. The rest? Lost to time, buried in dust, erased by war, or simply forgotten. So who decides what becomes heritage and what disappears? Take the example of the ancient city of Petra in Jordan. For centuries, it was completely unknown to the Western world. Locals called it the Forgotten City, its pink sandstone facades hidden in silence. Until, in 1812, a European explorer disguised himself as a Muslim pilgrim to sneak in and revealed its wonders to the outside world. Or think about Japan's Ise Grand Shrine, which has stood for over 1,300 years. But here's the paradox: it's torn down and rebuilt every 20 years. According to tradition, this ritual honors impermanence, the belief that beauty lies not in lasting forever, but in being reborn. So is the building the heritage, or is the act of rebuilding it what we're meant to remember? These contradictions force us to ask, is heritage about objects? Or about meaning, And what happens when cultural heritage is tied to painful history? Should we preserve battlefields where thousands died? Or statues that once symbolized power and conquest? Should we erase them or reinterpret them? The questions don't stop there. In many countries, indigenous cultures are still fighting for the recognition of their heritage, songs, dances, languages, while grand cathedrals or royal palaces receive millions in preservation funding. Why? Even UNESCO, the global body that designates World Heritage Sites, has been criticized. Some say its list favors certain cultures or styles over others. Others argue it's political, that a country must have influence, not just history, to be heard. So we're left with a haunting dilemma. Are we truly preserving the world's cultural heritage? Or only the parts that fit a convenient narrative? And more personally, what would we fight to preserve from our own lives, if we knew the world might forget it? As we look back in history, these questions become more urgent. Because behind every recognized site or forgotten ruin lies a human choice. And those choices, to preserve, to ignore, to rewrite, tell us more about today's world than we often realize. But if we want to understand how heritage is remembered, we first need to see how it was created. Because the story of cultural heritage doesn't begin with governments or global institutions. It begins with people. With artists, builders, thinkers, families, elders, and sometimes with a single, unexpected spark that lit the flame of a civilization. Thousands of years ago, long before the idea of cultural heritage even existed, people were already shaping the legacy we now struggle to protect. They built not for tourists or historians, but for gods, ancestors, and children yet unborn. Their works were acts of devotion, identity, survival, and imagination. In the highlands of Peru, the Inca carved the city of Machu Picchu into the mountaintop, not just as a royal retreat, but as a living symbol of harmony between humans and nature. Each stone was placed with such precision that centuries later, their walls still stand, defying earthquakes and time itself. Across the ocean, in Cambodia, the Khmer Empire raised Angkor Wat, a vast temple complex that mirrored the cosmos. Its towers were not simply religious monuments. They were the embodiment of cosmic balance, earthly power, and sacred memory, an attempt to bring the heavens down to earth. In Europe, the Roman Forum once buzzed with political speeches, commerce, and celebration. It was the beating heart of a civilization that shaped laws, language, and architecture across continents. And yet, centuries later, its ruins were buried under farmland, forgotten, until they were uncovered stone by stone, a buried memory returning to life. In North America, long before European settlers arrived, the indigenous peoples of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy had already formed sophisticated systems of governance, storytelling, and sacred tradition, passed down not through buildings, but through oral wisdom. For them, heritage was not a place, but a living practice, braided into everyday life. And in Kyoto, Japan, ancient artisans carefully shaped wooden pagodas using no nails, only joinery passed down from master to apprentice. These structures have withstood centuries, not just because of their strength, but because generations agreed, this must be kept alive. But these marvels were never guaranteed to survive. Machu Picchu lay hidden in the jungle for 400 years after the fall of the Inca Empire. Angkor was swallowed by forest after the Khmer decline. Indigenous stories in Canada were nearly silenced by colonial policies that banned native languages. Wars, natural disasters, and colonization shattered traditions. Yet somehow, many of these legacies endured. Why? Because behind every monument, there were people who remembered. People who whispered the old songs, rebuilt what was broken, refused to let stories die. And eventually, others noticed. In the 20th century, as the scars of two world wars shook the conscience of the global community, the idea of protecting cultural heritage took a new form. Countries formed agencies. UNESCO was created in 1945. The World Heritage Convention followed in 1972, promising to safeguard outstanding cultural and natural heritage for all humanity. By then, the world had already lost much. But it was not too late to protect what remained. The question now was no longer just what to preserve, but how and why. And that led to another truth, hidden beneath the stones and legends. Heritage has never been just about the past. It has always been about power. Cultural heritage, in all its beauty and inspiration, is not immune to politics, pride, or profit. In fact, the very act of choosing what to preserve and what to ignore has always reflected deeper forces at play. Consider the great museums of the West. Inside the British Museum or the Louvre, you'll find treasures from every corner of the world: Egyptian mummies, Greek marbles, African sculptures, Mesopotamian tablets. But many of these artifacts were not gifted, they were taken during wars, conquests, or colonial expeditions. Their preservation today is often used to justify their possession. But who decides who owns the past? There's a quiet irony. Some of the most precious cultural treasures are protected far from the lands that birthed them, displayed under glass, studied by scholars, seen by millions. Yet the communities from which they came may live in poverty, without the means to visit, let alone reclaim, their own legacy. This is not only about museums. Even within a single country, heritage can become a tool of dominance. Governments may choose to fund monuments that reflect a glorious national past, while ignoring, or even destroying, sites that reveal darker chapters. In authoritarian regimes, entire cultural histories have been erased to rewrite identity. Libraries burned. Shrines flattened. Songs banned. And sometimes, heritage is reshaped not by neglect, but by the lure of tourism. When a site is declared a World Heritage Site, it often brings waves of attention and money. Towns that once struggled economically become destinations. But preservation becomes performance. Traditional homes are converted into gift shops. Sacred festivals are rescheduled to fit the tourist calendar. Cultural meaning becomes entertainment. In Kyoto, some locals worry that the charm of the city is being consumed by mass tourism, its temples overrun, its quiet streets no longer quiet. The question arises, can something still be authentic when it must constantly please outsiders? Then there's the cost. Preserving ancient sites can demand millions, sometimes more than a nation can afford. Restoration requires rare materials, expert skills, constant maintenance. Who pays? Wealthy governments? International agencies? Private donors with their own interests? And yet, even as economics and politics shape what is remembered, there are communities who continue to protect their heritage not for fame or funding, but out of love. Sometimes in secret. Sometimes in resistance. Think of the Maori carvers of New Zealand, who passed down their craft with reverence, knowing each line holds a story of ancestry. Or the elders in Indigenous Canadian communities who teach children to speak the language once outlawed, reviving a culture once nearly silenced. But these efforts face constant tension between preservation and change, between honoring tradition and adapting to the future. So we must ask, who gets to tell the story of cultural heritage? Is it the archaeologist? The politician? The donor? Or the community whose life breathes within it? And more importantly, when we preserve heritage, are we saving something real? Or only a carefully chosen memory? These questions are not abstract. They're lived, felt, and fought for by real people every day. And their stories, their losses, their resilience, their joy, are what give cultural heritage its true meaning. Behind every stone carved, every tradition passed on, there are hands, real, living hands. There are tears, pride, fear, rebellion. Cultural heritage is not just about monuments. It is about the emotions and ideologies that surround them, and the people who carry them forward. In the Canadian Arctic, the Inuit people once carved delicate figurines from soapstone, depictions of spirits, hunters, family. For generations, these carvings were acts of survival and spiritual connection. But during the 20th century, government policies and forced assimilation nearly destroyed their way of life. Children were taken to residential schools. Languages suppressed. Traditions ridiculed. Today, many Inuit artists still carve. But the meaning has shifted. Now, each piece is not only an artwork, but a quiet resistance, a remembrance. It says, "We are still here." In Cambodia, after the terror of the Khmer Rouge, many artists, musicians, and dancers were lost, targeted because culture was seen as a threat to total control. The ancient tradition of Apsara dance, once performed in the royal courts and etched into the stones of Angkor Wat, nearly disappeared. But survivors began teaching again. In battered classrooms and small studios, they moved slowly, painfully, remembering. Young girls now learn those dances not just as art, but as healing, as a connection to ancestors who danced before them. Cultural heritage can also divide. In Europe, debates rage over statues of colonial figures and slave traders. Some believe they should be torn down, that honoring them prolongs injustice. Others say they must remain, as historical reminders of what not to repeat. The clash is emotional, raw. It's not about the statue. It's about what it represents, pain for some, pride for others. In New Zealand, many Maori communities have fought to reclaim sacred lands and language after decades of marginalization. Their heritage is not just a collection of myths or dances. It is the right to name, to speak, to belong. Every victory in land return or language revival is deeply emotional, a reconnection to identity. Meanwhile, in Japan, traditional crafts like indigo dyeing, sword forging, and tea ceremony continue through the hands of masters known as living national treasures. These are not celebrities. They are stewards. Many live humble lives, yet carry the weight of centuries. Their apprenticeships are long, spiritual. They do not simply teach technique, they transmit worldview. What unites these stories is not fame or recognition. It's the quiet dignity of care, the belief that culture, even when wounded, still breathes. But cultural heritage also carries risk. Ideologies can twist it into propaganda. Nationalism can claim one history as superior, erasing others. Pride can harden into prejudice. And the past, instead of guiding us, becomes a weapon. So perhaps the truest test of heritage is not how long it survives, but how it helps us live today. Can it make us more human? Can it teach us to listen to one another, across generations, across cultures? Or will we keep building walls, even from the stones of history? In a fast-moving world of updates, uploads, and the next big thing, cultural heritage invites us to slow down, to remember what came before us, and to ask what we're leaving behind. Today, global challenges threaten not only ancient ruins or rare traditions, but the very idea of collective memory. Climate change is eroding coastal archaeological sites faster than we can study them. Conflict zones have seen the bombing of sacred temples and museums. Urban development often replaces the old with the new, without asking, what are we losing? But not all threats are physical. Sometimes, it's the slow forgetting, the disappearance of language, stories, and rituals, as younger generations move to cities, speak global tongues, and drift from ancestral ways. This loss is less visible, but perhaps more permanent. So what can we learn from the heritage that has endured? First, we learn that identity is layered. We are not only citizens of countries, we are inheritors of civilizations. Each of us is shaped by a tapestry of past cultures, languages, migrations, and beliefs. Understanding this makes us more rooted, but also more open. It reminds us that we are not alone, we are part of something much older and larger. Second, heritage teaches resilience. Whether it's Maori oral traditions surviving colonization, or the hand-carved cathedrals rebuilt after war, these stories tell us that beauty and meaning can endure even through loss. They whisper, you can rebuild. You can remember. You can carry forward. And perhaps most importantly, heritage challenges us to ask, what will future generations inherit from us? Will they find ruins, or wisdom? Will they hear our stories, or only see our monuments? Will they feel the human soul that shaped this time? In this sense, preserving heritage isn't only about the past. It's an act of responsibility toward the future. In New Zealand, school children are once again learning Te Reo Maori, the language once nearly erased. In Japan, young artists return to ancient crafts with modern twists. In North America, digital archives are being built to protect endangered indigenous knowledge. These are not just projects, they are bridges. And you, dear learners, you are part of this, too. By learning English through these stories, you are doing something powerful, you are connecting worlds. You are understanding not just grammar and vocabulary, but values, histories, voices. So ask yourself, what heritage do I carry? What stories live in my family, my culture, my voice? And how can I make sure they are not lost? Because learning a language is more than communication, it's a way of remembering what it means to be human. Cultural heritage doesn't rest quietly in the past. It echoes, sometimes softly, sometimes in thunder, through every generation that dares to listen. Even when the buildings collapse, even when the stories are scattered, their influence lingers in how we think, how we see beauty, how we imagine the world. The architecture of ancient Rome shaped government buildings from Washington to Paris. Indigenous ecological knowledge influences modern conservation strategies. The mythologies of ancient Japan still ripple through anime and art. The carvings of Africa appear in fashion, in dance, in political protest. Yet not all legacies are fully understood. In the desert of Saudi Arabia, rock carvings older than the pyramids remain barely studied. Who made them? What did they believe? In the jungles of Central America, cities of the Maya lie half buried, their meaning only partly revealed. What secrets lie within their glyphs? And in the Arctic, ice melts are exposing Inuit artifacts that haven't seen daylight in thousands of years, but will we save them before they vanish again? These lingering mysteries are more than academic puzzles. They remind us that our view of the past is always incomplete, always filtered by what survives, what is allowed, and what we choose to see. Sometimes, a discovery reshapes everything. In 1991, hikers in the Alps stumbled upon a frozen corpse, not a recent death, but a 5,300-year-old man. Otzi, as he's now known, wore carefully stitched clothes, carried tools, even medicinal herbs. His body opened a door to a time we thought lost. But it also raised questions. Who was he? Why was he there? Was he killed, or did he die alone? Cultural heritage doesn't just answer. It asks. And maybe that's the point. Because in the face of ruins, we are forced to feel wonder. In the face of forgotten names, we must wrestle with silence. In the face of lost knowledge, we are humbled. What we preserve, what we forget, and what we still don't understand, all of it is part of the human story. And sometimes, the most haunting echoes are not in stones or symbols, but in what's missing. In the rituals no longer performed. The languages no longer spoken. The songs that were never recorded. Will they ever return? Or are they waiting, silently, for someone, somewhere, to remember? Dear learners, as we come to the end of this journey, we invite you to pause, not to summarize, but to feel. What does it mean to be part of a story that began long before you were born? A story written in stone, in dance, in silence. A story not just of kings and empires, but of everyday hands shaping clay, voices singing into the wind, elders whispering truths to the young. Heritage is not frozen in time. It is not a museum you walk through and leave behind. It is living. It changes with us, and we with it. In every tradition we keep alive, in every memory we pass on, in every question we dare to ask, we become part of that legacy. And in every silence, every forgotten word, we also lose a little piece of who we are. So here is the question we leave with you, not as a test, but as a seed. What would you save if everything around you began to disappear? A place? A phrase? A recipe? A name? What is the heritage of your heart? And what will you do, in your language, your learning, your life, to make sure it is not lost? If this story moved you, helped you learn, or made you think differently, please consider supporting us. You can like this video, leave a comment sharing what cultural tradition means most to you, or subscribe for more stories that connect language with meaning. And if you'd like to go deeper, explore exclusive lessons, or help us continue making this content, you can click the Join button to become a channel member. Every voice, every share, every bit of support helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for being here, not just as a learner of English, but as a listener of history. Because in the end, heritage is not what we inherit. It's what we choose to carry forward. Until next time, keep asking, keep remembering, and keep uncovering.